No risk it, no biscuit.
Coming from the Arizona desert, presented by SBNation.com. For Arizona Cardinals fans, by Arizona Cardinals fans, with outsider and insider's perspectives, this is Revenge of the Birds. Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans. This is Revenge of the Birds Radio for show number 114. I'm your host, Jess Roots. We're talking Arizona Cardinals and the NFL Draft. And tonight on our show, Seth Cox is with me. Seth, how are you doing tonight?
I'm good, Jess. How's it going?
Well, getting closer and closer to the draft. Finally, we're getting to, Cardinals stuff, we've had a lot of news, kind of some stuff to talk about, but we are finally getting to the point where mock drafts are getting bored because they have the same guys, and it seems like everybody's saying Ryan Kelly to the Cardinals in round one, blah, 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 blah. But are you ready for the draft? I'm ready for the draft. Let's get this over with.
Yeah, I'm ready for the draft. I'm ready to be in Chicago and kind of enjoy the atmosphere and what's going on there. It's gonna be a nice time, and just kind of be done with the whole process, because we're getting to the theater of the absurd part of it. We really talked about it last week on the show on the Draft Breakdown podcast about when you're starting to compare guys like Miles Jack to being better than Hall of Famers. It's time to wrap it up. So,
but that hyperbole continues. Even was it Daniel Jeremiah? Maybe it was. I think one of the draft guys just posted like the guy he would, and they are every bit as hyperbolic about Miles Jack as anyone else. And I'm like, I hope he's good. I really hope he's good, because my goodness, the expectations being heaped on this kid are insane.
Yeah, and I think that's my biggest issue with any blanket player comparisons, right? So I like to do spectrums, like players fall on a spectrum, for instance. So like a guy we'll talk about tonight, you got a guy like Joey Bosa from Ohio State, who I think is going to be a really good player in the league. And if I was going to give him a comp, I think the comps are Cam Jordan, the guy in New Orleans who's a 10-sack-a-year guy. And I think the low end is like a Kyle Vanden Bosch, who was a very nice player in the NFL for a long time.
And took a little while for him to really kind of make his mark.
Yeah. But, he's a guy that he's not going to give you, 10 sacks a year. He'll have a season or two of 10 sacks, but he'll hover around the 6 to 7 mark every year. But he's going to be a player you can count on. And if that's a low end that you're getting, and what that does to me is that creates a spectrum that a guy can play on. And so, if your low end's a Kyle Vanden Bosch and your high end's a Cam Jordan, who's a potential all-pro, that's a pretty good spectrum to go on there. And that's fair to the player. Whereas, just the blanket, Miles Jack can be a faster Ray Lewis is
he might be the best player in this draft.
Yeah, it's just absurd and unfair, because then it sets expectations. And if Miles Jack just becomes Thomas Davis, who's a great linebacker, all of a sudden he's a letdown because he's not Ray Lewis and a generational talent.
So we're going to talk tonight. We're going to touch on just a little bit, because everyone else has been talking about. We're going to be talking a little bit about what Bruce Arians said. He kind of, caused a little bit of a mess, so to say, when he had a whole bunch of high school football coaches and talking about fundamentals, talking about the attack on the game of football. Tyrann Mathieu, who had this fantastic interview a week ago with CBS Sports' Pete Prisco, beloved, becoming a star, in the wake of the tragic shooting and death of Will Smith in New Orleans. Tyrann has kind of become sort of the spokesperson for the culture of New Orleans. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. But our focus on this show is we're going to wrap up the NFL draft. We're going to wrap up talking about different positions. We're going to talk about the edge players. We're going to talk about inside linebacker. We're talking about defensive backs for the Arizona Cardinals. Mainly the format is going to go like we did last week, the last couple of weeks. Who are the guys that who are the top of the class that the Cardinals are going to have no chance at? We'll look at some possibilities, potential candidates at the end of round 1. And then we'll look at, the Cardinals draft at the very end of day 2 and then most all of day 3. So who are some guys that we could take a look at that perhaps are some fits there for the Cardinals, but at the rest of the defense. So are you ready to go, Seth?
Yep, let's get going.
All right, so let's start with the hot button issues. Bruce Arians comes out and says to a bunch of high school coaches, and, I didn't have a ton of issue with what he said, but he comes out and says, the game of football is under attack and there's all these things being good. Trying to compare, again, throwing the numbers out there that women's soccer, girls soccer has more injuries, more concussions than football. And he's got the numbers there. But then he goes, we got to convince the moms. It's the moms that are scared. It's not the dads. It's the moms that are scared. He backtracks a little bit and clarifies on Twitter saying, in most cases, it's the mother that's the decision maker. It's gotten a lot of airplay on radio shows, on Sports Center, and kind of across the board. So the Cardinals are in the media. What did you think initially of these comments for Bruce Arians? And we're just going to talk about this brief. Should he have said it? Is he being taken out of context? What does he really mean? And should he just, back off? Because he's become really kind of an ambassador for football, whether that's something we want or don't want.
Yeah, I think he's just got to realize that what he says is going to be taken and run with. So he needs to choose his words more carefully. I think you never want to attack moms in general. And to be fair, like a lot of people I know are, guys that say, I'm not going to let my kids play football until they're age X, or I'm not going to ever let them play. Like there's just other options for them. So, I think Arians has made his living
shooting from the hip.
Well, not just that, but as, a football guy. Like that's been his whole life. And he takes issue with the fact that it's a dangerous game and, blah, 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 because, it's been very good to him. But on the flip side, there are a lot of people that it has not been good to. So I think it's fair. The criticism's fair because, he needs to understand what the topic is and subject is, because he kind of sounds like that old kook that's, like, oh, there's no such thing as global warming, kind of like that guy. Like, oh, it's not dangerous. Well, it is, like, if it's not properly taught and kids don't learn at the right age and all of that. And that's kind of what it boils down to. Maybe having a caveat in how he said it would have been best, as opposed to a blanket, it's the moms we got to convince, type thing.
And I'm going to defend him on a couple of levels. I think he's being taken a little bit out of context. I look at the context of what he was saying. He was talking about who was he talking to? A bunch of football guys. Now, granted, it was on a setting that was recorded and attended by media, and so those comments are going to go public. But ultimately, he was in a room full of other football coaches who I'm sure understood exactly what he was talking about. As to the whole gender thing, the point that I see more than anything, and it's not so much about the two-parent homes, but there are, especially among a large population of who will end up being the future NFLers, as we've looked at the population of NFL players now, how many of these players came from single-parent homes who were raised only by their mother, who had almost no influence from their father? We have a whole bunch of examples of those. Those are the mothers, especially because, in particular, when we cross over into a racial divide. Some of who will be the most athletic and some of the most talented, but the least fortunate who need football. There are going to be a lot of mothers now, because of the awareness with football, who may not be making as much of an educated decision to keep their kids away from football, but simply because they're scared because of what they've heard on ESPN, because it's become such a hot button topic. And those mothers are the ones who will need convincing. So Arians has a point. He didn't do, he was good old Bruce. He just says, he says stuff. He is well-meaning with what he says, but he says a lot of things for effect. We've learned this over 3 years with covering the Cardinals. So he just says things. He says things for effect. He says things to make me laugh and to get attention. And this time it'll backfired a little bit because when you start touching on political type things or gender issues or race issues, it becomes very difficult to tread those waters and speak off the cuff.
Yeah, and I agree with you. The overall context and subject of what he was saying, it was more to the point of, we have to tell these people that may not be getting the correct information that it's not that dangerous of a game. But yeah, like I said, I think it just needs to be taken with more of a caveat. I think he need to explain himself better. But like you said, I think that's the biggest thing that needs to be taken from this is he was talking to a bunch of football coaches. So he's talking a language that they understand already. So maybe, don't try to pull that and make a headline as a reporter from that.
But the clicks, I understand that. It's the internet. We need the clicks. Head over to therevengeofthebirds.com. We're going to have this podcast posted there, but we want to talk about stuff. The other topic is Tyrann Mathieu. We saw the touching video where he kind of opens up. You crack open his mind, and you get a look into his past of all the hardship he overcame and the way it affected him as a person. And now it seems maybe we're becoming more aware of it, but he's being more and more active on social media and made the media rounds again after the death of Will Smith, former New Orleans Saints linebacker. Tyrann kind of speaking out of the culture of New Orleans and the situation there and trying to start making a difference. He spouts off about this guy who killed him, who allegedly killed Smith, that he knew him. It's a bit of a bully, altercation type guy. Then goes into, what New Orleans is like. And he's also talking about money. And I mean, he's a very inspiring young man, but he's getting very active on social media. And what do you think of this whole situation? I have one take. You've got another, especially on a particular topic when he gets on social media.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with anything he said regarding New Orleans and the state of Louisiana and anything like that. One, because I've never been there and, I don't know the culture and the atmosphere. And so I can't speak to that. But the thing that kind of gets at me is stop talking about your contract so much and your money or lack of money. To give back or whatever. Because that's the thing, he does give back. So that was a stupid comment by whoever made it on Twitter to him. But he doesn't need to justify what he does with his money, right? And if people want to call him a hypocrite or whatever, you just got to let it roll off your back. But don't bring up your contract in that, well, when I get paid or if I get paid, that's juvenile. You're going to get paid if you're healthy. You just need to keep your head down and keep playing hard. And I just don't like that one part.
And for me, it's a case of I don't have a problem with anything he says about the culture of New Orleans. That's something that I have no authority on. I grew up in a very fortunate area. Well, I didn't grow up with a lot of money. I grew up in a neighborhood with 2-parent family. I didn't have people dying around me. I didn't have issues with the law. I had a home to go to. My mom was always home in the afternoon. So I don't even understand any of that. Growing up, a kid in down, East Valley, Mesa. But the one thing I am very intrigued about what we're seeing now, and I hope you guys didn't pick up my daughter just printed something, so she picked up the sound of my printer right next to my microphone. But Tyrann Mathieu is blossoming from a guy that's simply a super popular football player, has that fancy name, that popular name, the Honey Badger, into on the field star because of last year and he did with his play, and is now developing into a legitimate national star, recognized by everyone in football and out of football. And in a way, the way that Will Smith has, kind of took the city of New Orleans under his wing and gave back so much, we're going to begin to see a very active Tyrann Mathieu in the community. And in that sense, this is very, very fun to see as he develops into a face of the NFL. Honestly, he's kind of developing into a face of the NFL.
No, he is, and that's what's fun to see, and to see him develop as a star. And like I said, I think the main thing is for him, he's just got to stay healthy. Like, stay healthy and all the stuff that you deserve, and he does deserve, in my opinion. It'll come to him.
And stay healthy, make your money, but don't talk about it. Give money away, do your stuff. Fantastic. Let's talk NFL draft. So next on Revenge of the Birds Radio, we're going to talk NFL draft. We're talking edge players, we're talking inside linebacker, we're talking defensive backs. So next on Revenge of the Birds Radio, talking specifically edge players. So let's start now. The edge, which has been for most of the offseason, has been the topic of discussion up until the time when they traded for Chandler Jones. Everyone for the last year has been saying, oh, the Cardinals are going to draft a pass rusher. They're going to draft a pass rusher. They're going to draft a pass rusher. So now we're past the point where they think, oh, they have to draft a pass rusher. Because now they got Chandler Jones on one side. You've got Marcus Golden on another side. And you've got, maybe Dwight Freeney comes back. You've got Alex Okafor, Shaq Riddick, and Kareem Martin in the wings who can play some sort of a role. And what was clearly a deficiency at least looks like it's adequate with the potential of being a strength, especially if the dynamic of Chandler Jones and Marcus Golden can begin. And for me, I kind of see the potential of what Shane Ray and Marcus Golden did in Missouri to have that sort of type of play from the edge. But we're not going to talk about that. We want to talk about the prospects. And we're going to lean again on Seth a whole bunch. Seth, who's one of the hosts of the NFL Draft Breakdown podcast, a great NFL draft source, where you get Justin Higdon, you got Justice Mosqueda, you get Jeff Ridden, and a whole bunch of guys around from draft Twitter, much smarter about this topic than I am. I'm good at the talking. I'm good at the writing stuff. Well, I'm okay at the writing stuff, I guess.
No, you're
but
good.
I'm passable. I mean, they let me in the building. So they let me into the building. They let me have a site, and people read it. But no, we're going to lean on Seth. I've got some thoughts on some of the players, just what we've seen. So let's talk first about the edge players. Who are the guys that we absolutely, you talked a little about Joey Bosa, but who are a few of those top-end pass rushers that we're expecting to see that the Cardinals aren't going to have any chance at?
I think when you first start, you go with Bosa. I don't know what he fits for the Cardinals. I mean, he's a good ball player, so he fits, obviously, but I don't know what he would play for the Cardinals. He seems a little big to be a stand-up outside linebacker, but then a little small, so he's going to be gone. I mean, it's not going to be an option. There are, some whispers. We talked about it on the podcast actually this week. There are some whispers that he might fall a little bit, but, fall to like 9, 10, not to,
29.
So he'll be gone. Barring shoulder issues, Shaq Lawson from Clemson will be gone. But he's a guy to keep in mind, kind of just in case, he does end up falling because of the shoulder issue. Because I think the Cardinals are in a spot where they can take a guy that might have, injury issues, but could also be a really impact player rushing the passer. So I think they're in a good spot for a player like Lawson if he was to fall to 29 because of the injury concerns for the shoulder. From there, the other two guys that are likely gone, but we can talk about, are Noah Spence and Leonard Floyd. Noah Spence of Eastern Kentucky. I can never remember what directional Kentucky he is.
Eastern Kentucky, formerly of Ohio State.
Yeah. So Ohio State guy who took the fall for some better players potentially in Rumorville, and then also had some other issues outside of the first drug issue. He's an interesting guy because he did not test well. And when it starts to get into testing, I I try to get into it as much as I can, but I'm not a guy that is like, ooh, this is interesting. I'm a guy that's like, it's a piece of the puzzle, but I don't see it as, like a huge thing. But when a guy tests as poorly as Spence did, it does put your antenna up about whether or not he is a guy that can transition to the outside linebacker position in the NFL. He actually tested very similarly to one Marcus Golden, and that was my main concern about Golden coming out of Missouri, was that he just wasn't a super athletic guy. You look at him, he's a guy that blew up the Senior Bowl, but there wasn't a lot of talent there at that position. And he's a guy that, as a sophomore at Ohio State, he had 8 sacks. That's really impressive for a sophomore. Obviously suspended and then played at Eastern Kentucky, and he had 11.5 sacks and 22.5 tackles for loss. So he's a guy that understands, what his job is. I think he's really strong at the point of attack, which is important to the Cardinals, and I think he can have an impact in the run game, which again is important to the Cardinals. But he's just, he's not super athletic, and so that's the one worry that you have with anybody like Spence is, can you have two guys that can't get to the passer because they're not super athletic in Golden and Spence? Is that too much of the same guy? If you would have told me before the process started that Spence would have tested like Golden, I would have laughed. But, after it happened, you just have to – it's just one of those things that you kind of, like I said, you put your antennas up, and you have to take that into consideration when you're weighing your options.
Well, and in this case, that's one of the things you use those testing for is you see on tape, but then, well, wait, what happened here on the testing? Why don't they match? If he's playing with elite, with the explosiveness off the ball, was it anticipation? Is he just playing against inferior competition? Why is it that the tape doesn't match the testing? Or is it just poor technique? Is there an injury? There's all those sort of things that start to pop up.
Yeah, and we'd mentioned it, but we didn't even really get into it. But he's also a giant red flag off the field. So, everybody wants to hate on Robert Kimdiche, the guy that's never been arrested that I know of, because I don't think he got arrested for the whole falling out of the window thing, right? Like he just,
from as far as I remember, I don't think so. Which was just a weird situation because he's a weird kid.
Yeah, but you have, you've got a guy in Spence who was basically kicked off the team at Ohio State, and Ohio State lets a lot of things slide. And then when he was asked about it at the combine, he basically said, "Well, I wasn't the only one doing it," and that doesn't endear anybody, right?
No.
So, yeah, so that'll be interesting. Next guy's Leonard Floyd. I am just not a fan. Like completely not a fan. And I think it's because I don't see him really as an outside linebacker. So if you're going to draft a guy that's an inside backer, but doesn't, hasn't played much inside linebacker, I don't know. There's other options in my opinion. So, but Floyd is a fluid athlete. He just doesn't play like it. Like if you told me who was going to test out at 4.6 and whatever, it was going to be Spence. But Floyd killed the skill or the athletic testing measures. He killed the jumps. He's just a super athletic guy that may struggle right now to make plays, and that's that's the one question you have with him is can he make plays at the next level? He's super thin. I think he's like 240, but he's 6'6", so he's not
didn't he measure in though at about 260 at the combine?
I think I have his combine right here, and it says 244.
Okay. For some reason, I thought he weighed in heavier at one of the pro day.
Like 230 before that.
Yeah, okay, that's what it was. It was he was like 230 listed when he was playing at Georgia.
Yeah, so
is a case of Leonard Floyd kind of the red flags. Some people really like him, and obviously the metrics add up for the athleticism that you want to see. But is it because of guys like Dion Jordan, Barkevius Mingo, who were elite athletes at the position, that are kind of scaring people away from Floyd?
Yeah, I think so, but he's going to go in the top 20. Everybody I've talked to, it sounds like he's going to go maybe even as high as 10. I don't even remember who picks at 10 right now, but I'll look at the order right now. But I really don't see how he gets to the Cardinals at 29. Like, I just don't think it's going to happen. So, he's going to be a guy that if he's on the board, it's going to be hard for the Cardinals to pass him up because he does things that nobody else on the Cardinals does, right? So Chandler Jones is a freak. Justice, who does the force players and talks about the importance of the athleticism and metrics testing. Justice talks about how Chandler Jones is one of the only non-force players that he doesn't understand. And he doesn't understand it because he plays, he calls him the alien because he just plays so differently than everybody else that tests like he did. So it's just one of those things. Floyd is the opposite. Like you said, he's kind of Mingo-ish in that he's not a guy that, made a ton of plays. He had good numbers at Georgia, especially his junior year, but he's just not a guy right now that he doesn't do it for me. And that's,
he's not a Ziggy Ansah who has the athleticism and you see the upside. He's a guy where you go, he's athletic, but
yeah. Well, and you look at it, he had 6.5 sacks as a freshman, and then 6 sacks as a sophomore, and then only 4.5 as a junior, as he was, moonlighting as an inside backer. I think he could be a nice inside backer, but he's a guy I'd take in like round 2, 3 that can process into like a Jamie Collins type player, as opposed to a guy I'd take in the top 10 and hope turns into an elite edge rusher type guy. That's just me.
Now, the list of players, of potential edge guys that the Cardinals could get at the end of the first round. Now, we've seen a lot of names, but this seems to be the end of the first round. Right, names I've seen on mock drafts, it ranges anywhere from the late first to late second. These are guys like Emmanuel Ogba at Oklahoma State. You've got Kamalei Correa from Boise State, Shalik Calhoun. You've got Kevin Dodd. The other guy, like how the Cardinals drafted Golden when there was Shane Ray. Kevin Dodd, who is Clemson's Golden to Shaq Lawson's Shane Ray. Then you've got who's I can't remember the name of the guy. Who's the other guy from Georgia? I've seen mocks.
Oh yeah, something Jenkins, Jordan Jenkins.
Jordan Jenkins, that's the one. That's one. Yes,
Jordan Jenkins is more athletic. Surprisingly, like he tested way better than a lot of people thought he was going to. So he's an interesting one. We can start with Correa because I know a lot of people like him. I don't get it personally, but whatever. Let's see here. So I gotta get to my notes. Sorry. So Correa, the one thing I think, like as we're trying to understand the Cardinals' philosophy, right? We're seeing that they tend to like bigger athletes at outside backer. Because even like Shaq Riddick was 6'6" and 255 or something like that.
I think he played at 247. He got up to 260 after during the draft process.
Yeah. So that's the one thing about Correa that has my antennas up. 6'3", he weighed in at 243. Didn't, dominate like you would think he would playing at Boise State. He's a good player though. Like I have a hard time with him in the first round And that's kind of where I get stuck on these guys like Agba, Correa, Shalik Calhoun, Kevin Dodd. Like, I don't think in a normal year any of these guys would go round one. Like, because they're not like a guy like Bud Dupree or, that had incredible numbers at the combine, or, a guy like Shane Ray, who were, freaks on the field. They're those tweeners that have nice numbers and nice careers, but they weren't dominant players.
They're the Alex Okafers and Shaq Achos and Sam Achos who get drafted in the 4th round normally, right?
Yeah, and I think he tested kind of similarly to Sam. So, I'm looking. Yeah, so he had in 2015 only 7 sacks. In 2013, because I think he's a senior, I have to look. In 2013, though, he had 12 sacks. So again, as you have more film on him, did everybody just figure him out? Like, what happened? Why was he struggling? Or why didn't he produce as much as he got a little more tape on him? That's my question on him. I think he's a nice player. Like, if they got him in the 3rd round, I'd be completely fine. It's the idea of him as a 1st round guy that's kind of a head scratcher to me.
Can he even be, the going Boise State guy, could he even be a guy that's like DeMarcus Lawrence? And DeMarcus Lawrence was a guy that when he came out, there was a lot of talk that he was a potential target for the Cardinals when they were looking pass rush as well. Does he even have a DeMarcus Lawrence type ceiling?
I don't think he's as good as Lawrence, personally. That's just me. But you know what? Honestly, like, he didn't get that's the other thing with him, is he didn't really get used as well as he should have. That's what I forgot. So that's what I have in my notes here at the end. Like, did they use him as well as they could have? And that's my, I think that's the most fair question to ask him. He doesn't use his hands well, really, at all. Doesn't have much power. So he's a guy, if somebody else gets their hands on him, he's done. Like, it's over and done with, and, just wrap it up. But if he can beat you with his first step, he's got a good chance. Do you remember Eli Harold coming out a couple years ago from
Yes.
Virginia? He kind of reminds me.
Was that just last year? Didn't San Francisco get him?
I think it was a couple years ago, 2 years ago, but it might have been last year. Let me look.
He was a guy the Cardinals were connected to for a long time.
Yeah, and he was, 6'3", 247, same type of size, speed type thing.
It was last year.
Yeah, last year. So same type of player. The difference was Harold, had better numbers as a senior. So that's my question for him. That's all.
And let's talk about a guy who's really polarizing. He's a guy that I warmed on, and he kind of backed off it. Listen to your guys' podcast. I don't watch a ton of college football. I tend to focus on Pac-12 stuff. So I don't watch a lot of tape, as they call it. But a guy like Emmanuel Ogbah, Oklahoma State, great production, and then tested, in some areas tested really athletic. But the tape tells you something else. Is it Justin who sees Kareem Martin? And, Kareem Martin was a project drafted in round 3, and now we're talking Ogbah round 1. Stephen White for SB Nation with a profanity-laden analysis. He's like, I don't understand who he is, because you see some of the plays he makes and you are jumping out of your seat. And then there's other times you're just seeing him completely disappear. Perhaps one of the biggest of the edge players, one of the biggest boom or bust players, because you see him dominate at such a high level, and then other times get completely dominated to where you wouldn't even want him on the field.
And that's basically what he boils down to. And it's the unfortunate reality of him is he's a guy that if you get him to engage every single play, he's a top 10 talent. Like you said, production plus, metrics say he's a top 10 talent, but you watch the film and he goes blank for
quarters at a time,
for games at a time.
That too.
Honestly, games. Like, I went back and looked at his numbers because I was curious. He had, I think it was 2 sacks against Florida State, and then he had like 1 sack and then a half a sack in the following 2 games, and then he did nothing for like 4 games, and that was against teams like University of Texas San Antonio, a directional Texas school. Like, he did literally nothing against them, and so you're like, I don't understand you. Like, how does that happen? How do you absolutely dominate a Florida State team laden with first round talent, and then you can't do anything against these little sisters of the poor? Like, it doesn't make sense. And I read Steven's kind of lament of him. That's basically what it is. I mean, he's a guy that if you get him engaged for 40 or for 60 minutes, and it's not 30 minutes, say, on defense, if you get him engaged for 30 minutes, you have a potential difference maker. The question you have to ask yourself is, can you get him engaged for that amount of time? He's never really shown it, so is it fair to expect him to do it as a pro when he's getting paid money? And in the same vein, though, you have Shalik Calhoun, who's a guy that is, again, Marcus Golden to me. Like, he's a guy that puts up good numbers. He's not super athletic. He doesn't do a ton of stuff well, but he doesn't do anything really badly. He's just not a guy that you can expect to finish a ton. And so he's going to average that, 4 to 7 sacks a year. He's going to peak one year and get 11, and then somebody's going to give him, $9 million a year, and he's never going to hit that number again. And that's okay, though. Like, you have to have those players. The problem is the Cardinals have 2, in my opinion, in Marcus Golden and Alex Okafor. So you don't really need a third in Calhoun. And Kevin Dodd's the same way. Let me find you a text I sent a buddy of mine while we talk about that for a second. I can't find it. All right, I'll just skip it. But
well, and for me, especially when we get into the Kevin Dodds and the Jordan Jenkins of the world, do you really want to, especially with a round 1 pick, do you really want to draft the second best player at that position on a particular college team? Marcus Golden, people were really critical of the Marcus Golden pick when the Cardinals selected him in round 2 last year. And now we're talking, we're not talking 2 elite pass rushers on a team. We're seeing one really good one and one with potential. And now we're talking round 1. Is this just the Von Miller effect? You see Von Miller play so well and make such a difference for the Broncos, where all of a sudden pass rusher edge defender is now the new quarterback of the league, that they're getting just pushed up the board simply because of the demand in the league.
I think it's that, and this draft class overall, they're just not very good. Like, we'll talk about it in a second as we go through the inside linebackers, because it's literally going to take 5 minutes. Like, they're just not very good.
Did you find that text?
No, I couldn't find it. But basically, it was the question was, Shaq Lawson, I think, put up 7 or 8 sacks last year playing behind Vic Beasley, who went 8th overall. Kevin Dodd was on the other side, so who was he playing behind, right? And then he couldn't get playing time as a freshman, sophomore, or junior, and he didn't make any impact until he was a senior. If you put together, like, Lawson's whole career, he ended up with, I think it was 70 negative plays, sacks, and tackles for loss, and Dodd ended up with 28, and almost all 28 of those came this year. I think it was 25 of them came this year. So, I mean, is that a guy, like you said, is that a guy you really want, who struggled to find, a way into the league, or find a way into a rotation on what is a great defense at Clemson, but then never really, did anything until the last year when he had another, like you said, a very good, maybe elite if he's healthy, Shaq Lawson across from him. So that's my only question. on him, and he's slow. Like I think he'd end up being a Calais Campbell type because he's like 280.
Ooh.
But he ran like he ran a 4.86 40. So he's not a fast guy. I don't know if he can stand up. So that's just what I kind of gathered from him.
The late round guys. Now the Cardinals obviously aren't, assuming they don't trade back. So if they trade back, then they're not not going to have a first round pick. We're talking end of round 3 and then creeping into day 3 picks. There are 2 names that I've heard a couple of times. I heard it on one of your podcasts. I can't remember if it was the Shrine Game was it the Shrine Game podcast when Jeff Risdon was on, or was it Senior Bowl?
He was on both. So
okay. Okay. So maybe it was the Shrine Game because the 2 names that came up were Victor Ochi and Matt Judon. Stony Brook, and I don't remember where Matt Judon plays. But I'm going through the
Judon.
Okay, and then I'm kind of going through the transcripts. I didn't hear the conference call that for NFL Network Charles Davis and Daniel Jeremiah were doing, and they bring up Judon and Victor Ochi. This is what Daniel Jeremiah says. As we go down to the lower in this level of competition, Victor Ochi from Stony Brook is a fun player to watch. He's kind of got the same height and frame as Dwight Freeney, but man, passer. Matt Judon from Grand Valley State is another one. These guys are in that 4th, 5th, and probably where they end up going. And Noah Spence, he's technically the smaller school at Eastern Kentucky, but obviously the Ohio State sub is someone else that will be fascinating to watch him. On tape, he plays like a mid to late first-round pick. He did not test it. We talked about that. So Matt Judon, Victor Ochi, are those guys, can you take a guy 4th round, 5th round, and expect them to be anything more than what can you actually expect of them? If you draft him.
It's unfair to expect much of them. Judon is a injury red flag right off the bat. So he had a ACL tear in I think 13 or 14. I can't remember what year it was. I know he's at least 2 years removed though. So, but then if you read his information, he didn't play at the Shrine Game, and I think that's what Jeff was talking about. He was disappointed he didn't get to watch him because or he practiced and then tweaked his meniscus while at the Shrine Game. So he's just definitely like a guy that a red flag because of injuries type thing. But he's an athlete and he's a big dude. He's 275 and he ran a 4.7 40. He has some nice jumps, and then he's really strong. He put up 30 reps on the bench. So. Ooh. And, he's just a guy that I think you get and you hope that he stays healthy. And I think he can be a guy and fairly, I think you can expect him to contribute eventually. Ochi's a different guy. He's kind of like Spence, but smaller, and he tested worse. So that's the question for him.
So he's got a Dwight, he compared to Dwight Freeney, but what Dwight Freeney had was super quick, plus that spin move. So he's got kind of built the same way. Basically, if the Cardinals take a flyer on him, he's maybe, special teams.
He'll be like a Sam Macho type player.
Okay.
Early, and then and he's a guy that you understand. He understands what he's supposed to do and things of that nature. So that he's a smart kid. So I think neither of those guys would be bad picks, but Judon would be a player I preferred if you're talking really late rounds. Another name to watch is Yannick Ngoku. He kind of fits this size profile at 6'2", 255. And then I'm trying to find the last guy that I wanted to mention. There's a ton of guys that are.
Would there happen to be? I'm looking at the conference call transfer. Would it happen to be Oklahoma's Eric Stryker?
No, he's too small. He's really tiny. He's only like 6'1" and 223.
Ooh, that's That's like Dale Buchanan size.
Yeah, what was his name? Kyle Fackrell. There he is.
Yeah, I should know him. He's a kid who went to my high school.
Yeah,
when I was working at the high school. Kyler, yes.
Yeah, Kyler Fackrell. Thank you. He's a nice ball player. I think he's torn both ACLs though. So again, injury red flag. He may be a guy. He kind of reminds me of the guy they allegedly wanted last year. I can't remember his name though. From Washington. Do you remember? Edge guy.
Oh, Jesus. Went to New Orleans.
Yeah. So, and he's not a bad player either. So, but again, red flag on the injury. But if you get him in round 3, I think it's a good pick. Like, I just think it's, you just have to get him.
Kikaha. Yeah. That's the name.
Yeah, Kikaha. He's a guy that you have to get at the right spot. Like, if you reach on him, you're going to, again, injuries bother me. Like I know you can't grade injuries.
You're cruel, Seth. Yeah. It's a cruel world.
But it's like one of those things. I'm not comfortable taking a guy that early when he's blown out both ACLs. So, there's other guys that you can even like look at. Joshua Perry from Ohio State's getting some run right now. I think he's going to end up being an inside backer. Just go through here. Anything else that catches my eye? No. I mean, you mentioned Jordan Jenkins, same type of player as our guy here. And that, again, we don't mean that as like a negative thing. It's just how many of those guys do you need on your team, right? Like, how many times do you need?
Oh, right. And if you're looking to improve the pass rush when you've already got Marcus Golden, when you've already got, and when you look at Shaq Riddick, who's got a higher upside than a lot of these because he's got the athleticism and the speed, a guy who potentially is that that edge guy with speed, except that he hadn't played the position
exactly
in college. So
when you move to the inside linebacker position, I'm interested to see what the Cardinals need. Kind of, aren't you? Like, are they going to quote unquote replace Kevin Minter? So are they going to draft somebody similar to Kevin Minter? Are they going to go all out in this kind of dollar backer type thing and find another dollar linebacker? If so, there's a couple of those in this draft that are interesting. If not, there's a couple of guys that are interesting in the Minter role. Obviously, Reggie Ragland's the big name. Miles Jack is the biggest name. He's not getting the Arizona.
And he's going to be the best player ever. So
yeah, exactly. But I mean, he's just not getting to Arizona, so don't even dream about it.
And Ragland is really in a lot of mock drafts isn't going to be anywhere available when the Cardinals come around, is he? And at least from most mocks that I've seen, but he's a guy that could fall.
Yeah, he's a guy that could fall, but I don't suspect will. Then the last guy of the big names is Darren Lee. He's a lot like Ryan Shazier was a couple years ago. Here's the one difference. Shazier was a really, really good linebacker at Ohio State. Darren Lee is a good linebacker. He's only played linebacker for 2 years. So, he's got room to grow, which is, I think that's important. We talked about it last week with Jerron Reed and A'Shawn Robinson, and Reggie Ragland probably falls into the same category. Like, how much are those guys going to get better because they're so good at what they do because of Alabama? So how much better are they going to get? Those are the names early to know. For me, the really, really interesting name is Deion Jones of
yes.
LSU.
Doesn't he sort of fill kind of both roles? If you're looking all around, what is he? Isn't he a little on the light side?
Yeah, he's only 223-ish, 228. They list him at 228.
So he's a little lean, but he can play coverage and he can play the thumper guy. He's just not quite as big but he's more athletic than Minter, which he's a guy that I really like. Because if we go back to what the Cardinals did in 2013 when you had Darrell Washington and Carlos Dansby, that was great. But they knew that was going to happen. They had always planned on having a Washington athletic guy in space paired up with the thick thumper and run stuffer in Kevin Minter. That's how they designed that. And they just had the luxury of Dansby, who actually can do both. Now they kind of got that again because Dale Buchanan is a linebacker. I don't know if they're going to continue to – I don't think what's going to happen. But he was He's got the Darrell Washington position. He's going to play the Darrell Washington role. Minter's there for another year. Does Jones fit that, and could he play that role in the years to come?
Yeah, I think it'd be more of a Dansby Washington, neither of those guys being as good as Dansby, but both being on the same type of playing field, high-end comp as Washington. Again, high-end comp. So we're not talking a guy, we're not saying that's going to happen. But I don't, Jones, I don't know if he's going to be there in round 3. So that's
right. And so is there going to be anyone else? There was I can't remember the name, but it was a name I'd never heard of. Pro Football Focus's mock draft. And how they kind of do things. It's kind of their own way because they look at the grades of what the players do well, matching with the grades of what the Cardinals don't do well. And they had some guy in their 3rd round. I can't remember the name. Forgive me about that. But
Steven Daniels.
Yeah, run stuffing guy, kind of the Kevin Minter plus. Is that what or is he just Kevin Minter?
Kevin Minter, Ronald McKinnon type. So he's super short, like 5'11", but he's like 250. So, it'll be interesting to see if he's really an option. I don't think he is. But like you said, PFF does it their own way. I talked to one of their analysts and I kind of asked him about it because I'm like, this doesn't really make sense to me. And he explained it to me, and he said, let me just read what he said real quick if my Twitter opens. Yeah, because I said I didn't like the pick personally. He said that's a fair point. A lot of sideline to sideline in that division. And I said, he's probably what they hoped Minter could be, which is, fair. And he said, and the guy responded, that's essentially how I'm viewing him. I think he can be close to what Brandon Spikes was. And again, Brandon Spikes was a key cog in the New England Patriots run defense. Just like, I don't know. Is there still a place for that in the NFL? Maybe not. So that's my take on that.
You probably only can have that specific role if you've got a super athletic, speedy guy who's sideline to sideline on the other side. I think it only works that way as opposed to when you have Kevin Minter and Larry Foote on the field at the same time.
Exactly. So a couple other names to know, type guys. One name that I like that's interesting is Kentrell Brothers out of Missouri, another Missouri guy. He's a little more athletic than what Daniels is. Same type of build though, 6 feet, 245. He ran about the same time. So he played faster, quote unquote. He kind of compares to like another Minter, Paul Dawson type. So that's what you have to wonder about him. Again, Eric Stryker is in there, but I don't think he can play in the NFL. I like him too. I just don't know if he can get on the field. His teammate Dominique Alexander is interesting as well. So he's another inside backer. But he's, I don't want to say tiny because 230 is not a tiny guy, but he's not big by any stretch of the imagination. But he can cover a little bit, which is I think going to play into what the Cardinals want to do. And so I think having guys like Jones and Alexander. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes for if there's anybody else I want to mention. Pairing up with Drone are good things to have because I think they allow the Cardinals to be flexible and do different things.
And so, is that about it when you talk about inside linebackers?
Yeah, I mean Blake Martinez, Josh Forrest from Kentucky. You can mention Scooby Wright, my buddy Justin. Thinks Scooby's going to be a good ball player in the NFL. I think he's around the ball a lot, but I think he's also like extremely slow twitched. So I just wonder, like,
it's like Marcus Golden in space.
Yeah, I just don't know if he's going to be a guy that you can count on to be he's going to get the Zach Thomas comps because he's not super tall and athletic. So let's compare him to the one of the best smaller white inside linebackers ever, and that'll make sense, right?
Right. So that wraps up the linebackers, both the edge and inside. So up next on Revenge of the Birds Raider, we're talking defensive backs. We'll talk about the cornerbacks. We'll talk about the safeties, both of which are a position we could see the Cardinals go at some point. We expect the Cardinals to go.
Hey, sports fans, football season's here, and it's time to get in on the action with MyBookie. MyBookie is the industry-leading sports betting website that offers real Vegas odds on football, baseball, and all your favorite sporting events. You can take a side, the total, or even fantasy points props. MyBookie lets you bet online and win big. Did the game already kick off? Don't sweat it. MyBookie has in-game live betting on every major league and event, even esports. There's no better time to join MyBookie than today. Go to MyBookie to open an account and start winning. Use promo code CHAMPION when you register for your account and get a 100% sign-up bonus up to $1,000 on your first deposit. Bet today. Visit MyBookie's website or call 844-866-2387. That's 844-866-2387. Check them out today and use promo code CHAMPION for a 100% bonus. Terms and conditions apply for entertainment purposes only. Void where prohibited.
So let's talk defensive backs. Who are the defensive backs of? Okay, I think number one, Jalen Ramsey, talking impact type of player at the top. Jack could go number one. Cardinals, I mean, how good is Ramsey going to be?
I think he's going to be great. I think he could be Charles Woodson. So, I mean,
wow.
I think that's his high-end comp. His low-end comp is probably like I'm trying to think of a good player to comp him to down there. I don't know, because you don't want to go too low on him, because I think he's going to be a very good player for a long time. But I think at worst he's a guy that starts, in your defensive secondary for a long time and can play multiple positions. Will he ever reach the Woodson level? That's the question, right? Like, that's why the evaluation process is hard. But he has similar talent. He has similar size and build. So Vernon Hargreaves is the next, guy at corner. The Joe Hayden comps aren't just because he's from Florida. He's smaller, but he has long arms, moves really well. So he tested a lot better than everybody thought he was going to. So he's a guy that won't be there. Mackenzie Alexander is a guy that's, based on what we talked about on the podcast the other day, will be there. People think he's going to fall out of round one because he's, only 5'10". He's 190, but he has consistent hamstring issues. So is that a guy that you can, trust at the cornerback spot that isn't overly athletic?
And it doesn't necessarily even fit the profile, the profile the Cardinals are looking for, because they're looking for length and speed.
Yeah. So those two guys right off the bat are Eli Apple and William Jackson III. Eli Apple, in our group chat, we call him sticky, and good and bad. Like, he's sticky, kind of like who's the corner? I can't remember his name. But he's a guy that plays way too physical down the field, like way too much. And so you look at him and you're like, dang it, like, get your hands off of him so you can make this play, And so that's what you worry about. And William Jackson III is kind of the same. Like, they are guys that are long, lean, athletic, and you wonder if they can keep their hands to themselves. We saw the struggles Patrick had coming out of LSU, and he was an elite talent. Now you're talking about a very good talent at best. Can they do that type of stuff? I like Jackson. Both of those guys are I think high end, like Jonathan Joseph type players. So I think that's a guy that you'd love to see in Arizona, and a guy that could really help. But again, anybody that's like calling for a rookie corner, you look at what Justin Bethel had done to him last year, and then just imagine a rookie. So I think it's going to be worse. Like, personally, I just think it's going to be a little worse.
Well, and do you think that any of these guys would be able to beat out Justin Bethel at this point? No,
I don't think so in year one. I think the only guy that could is a guy that they're not going to have a chance to have, and that's Vernon Hargreaves. A name to know. And I'm not sure what where he's going to go, but a name to know is Artie Burns. We talked about him a little bit on the podcast the other day. So I think he's going to be a guy that goes a little bit higher than we think. He's 6 feet and like 190, so he's athletic and big, but he's also a guy that he played at the U. They were under a lot of issues with Al Golden there, but he has length, speed, and he makes plays on the ball, and that's just such a necessary necessary skill set to have to play in the NFL, that you wonder if they will take a guy like that if at like 29, or if they trade back into early day 2. I don't think he'll be on the board at 91. If you skip down a little bit to like a Xavier Howard from Baylor, again, another interesting athlete, long, lean, and stuff of that nature. So, those are the guys that I think could be day 1, early day 2 if they trade back. From there, it's an interesting crop. Like a Zach Sanchez and Cyrus Jones are both guys I would love in Arizona to fill the Tyrann Mathieu role in case Tyrann gets hurt again, or in case you want to line him up more at safety early on and allow the Cardinals to play a little bit, more aggressively and not have to worry about Justin Bethel in the slot. The name that I brought up the other day, and I want to make sure I get his name right. Hold on. I got to make sure I have it here. Where did he go? James Bradbury is an interesting name from Samford, Samford. Samford. He is like the prototype of what they're looking for. 6'6", almost 6'2". He's a big dude, long. And I think he can play corner or, kind of the outside corner or safety. And I think that's what the Cardinals are looking for, is versatility. So I think that's a name to remember on day 3. I think he's a guy that you could find and play for Arizona, because, again, he fits the size profile. I know Arizona met with...
Was it Tavon Young?
Yeah, Tavon Young out of Temple. Thank you. And he is the complete opposite. He's like 5'9", and 5'9" might be generous, but he is a baller. Like, you watch him play and you're like, wow, this guy's fun to watch. So I can see why they like him, or, what they might be doing, trying to get information on him. But like, he's a dude that can play. But again, 5'9", but he plays physical. I think he could potentially be good. Who's the Brent Grimes? Like, good Brent Grimes? But, that's just, again, that's a super high end, like, hope everything works out type things for a comparison.
A guy that I ran across when I was running the Last Trips draft simulation on Saturday, get to the end, the late rounds, and I'm just scouring for players that I think would catch the eye athletically. And one guy I ran across is Anthony Brown from Purdue. Not super tall. He's at 5'11". He's on the 5'11 and a quarter, I think is what it is. So he doesn't quite fit the height metric, but the speed, 4.33, and his run it as low as 4.22. What do you know anything about Brown?
I know the name because of that speed, like you talked about. I think he can kick return too, right?
That I don't know. I didn't look into him enough, but if we're looking for someone to develop, kind of like Justin Bethel, looking at that might be a guy that they could, elite athleticism with potential, but still very raw, and he could make an impact early on special teams, and maybe take Justin Bethel's role in some cases, so he doesn't get tired from playing special teams and cornerback.
And that's what it was. He wasn't a returner. He was a special teams ace at Purdue, and he's a very talented special teams player. So that kind of would make sense. He would be a fit to replace Bethel or take over for Bethel as that, developmental corner if that's the way they want to go. That's an interesting one. I had a couple notes on him because of that speed. I went back and tried to find some games, which are really hard to do. So I have literally 1.5 notes on him. But yeah, he's an interesting guy because, like you said, that speed, that's not something you can really teach.
So let's talk about the safeties now. The safeties in are set, sort of, right? And then they got for here, they got Tony Jefferson, DJ Swearinger, and Chris Clemens. Any one of those guys, honestly, especially Swearinger and Clemens, are very replaceable on the roster even in year one. Jefferson is probably going to play a very important role as their safety. We're getting hurt. Jefferson will play an important. There are some safeties, but are there? I've great. I think we found your mute button.
Oh no, you're cutting out a little bit.
Oh, did I? I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I was just trying to type you and I hit you. Sorry. No, I like Darian Thompson as the first free safety type prospect. Big, tall, lanky dude. He didn't move as well as I was hoping he was going to. So he might be off the board overall. He had 19 interceptions at Boise State though. So you always kind of gawk at that number like, holy crap, that's a lot. He's a guy that I think plays best on the back end in the deep coverage zone. So he's basically Rashad Johnson, but I think he can be a better overall player and a little more athletic, if that makes sense, type of thing. From there, it's a crapshoot of what you like, honestly. If you like a guy that's physical and can hit, you got a guy like Keanu Neal out of Florida who is kind of in the same mold as Dale Buchanan, but not as talented, in my opinion. The other guy, and I can't remember his name, and I'm going to hate myself for this if I can't remember his name. Oh, yeah, hold on. I'm in my wrong section. That's why. Carl Joseph.
That was the guy I was going to bring up because that's the guy that both Charles Davis and Daniel Jeremiah felt was the best overall safety.
Yeah, and I think he can do a couple different things, which is, important for the Cardinals. We keep talking about this, and I'll get to the guy that I think is the best fit in round 3. But if they choose Carl Joseph at the end of round 1, then all of a sudden you don't have to worry about this guy in round 3. But Joseph is interesting because he played hurt, or he was hurt this year. Excuse me. So, it's the question is, can he be a guy that plays on an every down basis, and can you take another guy that is an injury risk when you have Tyrann Mathieu and Tyvon Branch back there already? So that's the interesting thing with him. But he loves to hit. He's good skills in coverage, and he moves really well for his size. And so that's the thing. You have to wonder if a guy that hits so well and so hard overall can be a guy that you can play. I think he could move to free safety and kind of take over the center field role of Rashad Johnson. I got to remember each one. Rashad Johnson, but again, medicals are the biggest thing with Joseph for me. I think he's a good ball player, though. I think he's going to be a good ball player. The next guy that I've talked to a couple people about is Kevin Byard out of Middle Tennessee. So another small school name to kind of just keep on your list because we know how much of – go ahead.
Did he just come in for a workout or is scheduled to come in for a workout?
I think he's scheduled. I retweeted that. So he He's 5'11", but he weighed like 220, but he moved really well. I think he ran like a 4.3. Or 4.4. Like, he moved well. I want to make sure though. But we talked about it. We talk about him in our group text all the time, and the guys in there love him, think he can be a guy that can come in and eventually earn playing time. And that's all you want from a guy that you're going to pick in the 4th or 5th round, is a guy that can come in and play a little bit, as things, as they grow into their position. He's also a guy that can, come in and play on specials early and will be a guy that, that makes plays on special teams. And if you're drafting defensive backs, that's always a must. He's not as good in cover though. So like as a man cover guy, he's more of a zone cover guy. So again, Rashad Johnson type, but just a little more athletic and a bigger hitter. From there, the guy that's the most interesting to me, and I've skipped over guys like Jeremy Cash, Von Bell, J-Ron Curse is a guy that's interesting, but the tape was just so with J-Ron Curse that you wonder if he can turn it back on after turning it off and coasting for so long. But the guy that's super interesting to me is Sean Davis out of Maryland. And Davis is a guy that played corner, didn't do it very well, but he's got film of him playing safety and doing it pretty well. So you look at him and you say, okay, this is a guy that we could use, that we can grab at 91 maybe. But the thing is, he again is a freak athlete, like super freak athlete. And so that's what's going to be tough, is if you can get a guy like Davis at 91, because these hybrids like Byron Jones, Eric Rowe, these guys are going late day 1, early day 2 type. So those are guys that can, you wonder if he'll be there when the Cardinals come up to pick. But again, I think he's a guy that would make a lot of sense for the Cardinals in round 3, if they obviously don't go corner safety in round 1, because I think he's a guy that can make plays and can learn, and you can't teach the special skills that he has, which is he ran a 4.46 at 201, but his jumps were like in the 90th percentile. And then he put up 21 reps on the bench press. So he's a big dude that plays really big and aggressive. He's just got to learn, again, like all these guys do, to not be so grabby. And that's the main thing with a lot of these guys. And we didn't even get to everybody because, I know we're running a little late, but there's a lot of names to know at the safety position. I just don't know how good all of them are. That's the biggest question for me. It's like, is a Jalen Mills out of LSU a guy you can take a chance on because he has some of those unteachable skills? Is a guy like KJ Dillon, the other safety from West Virginia, like what do teams think of him? Because he's a little bit bigger and longer. So those are guys to know as well on day at that round 3 pick.
We've kind of wrap things up. Now, there's one player we didn't talk about, and we should have brought him up, and that's Jalen Smith, because, a guy who, fantastic player, has that gruesome knee injury in his very last college game. Do you see him as even being draftable at this point?
I think he's the guy you pick in round 4 or 5 if you have multiple picks, because he's got enough good stuff on tape that you'd be like, okay, I can take this guy. And if but if he doesn't pan out, then it's a 4th or 5th round pick. As much as everybody hates Logan Thomas because he was a wasted 4th round pick, that's what those guys are there for. They're the ones that you swing for the fences on and hope to come up. They did it last year with Rodney Gunter. They did it the year before with, Logan Thomas. A year earlier in the 5th round, they took Ryan Swope. That's what you do with those guys. Like you swing for the fence and hope that you hit a home run. And if you don't, you don't.
And is he going to go that far? I mean, will someone, see the potential and take him even late 1st, early 2nd, even in the 3rd round?
Hopefully not. Hopefully not the Cardinals. That would be my main thing. Like, I have no problem with taking a guy that is athletic or that has an injury or off the field concerns, but the cost has to be right. And I don't know if it's right for Smith at 29. I got a couple texts from a couple different people today that apparently Gambo was saying that they should pick him at 29 if he falls there. And it's absurd to think he would be there in the third round even. I think it's absurd to take him, at 29. I think it would be absurd to take him at 91 since you already traded a second round pick. Could you imagine if the Cardinals got like Paxton Lynch in round 1 and then took Jalen Smith in round 3 and didn't have anybody that made an impact the first two?
They're busts. They're all busts. Yeah. But that would be really interesting. So that would mean they would be banking on a couple of hits late, which you can't really bank on. It's always nice, but I mean, they've had it happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's just not something that you want to do. Like, that's what it boils down to. Like, you don't want to pressure yourself into, this has to be the pick type thing.
Well, let's go ahead and call this a wrap. So we've talked edge players, we've talked inside linebacker, we've talked about defensive backs. And, we're not going to worry about the specialists. We're not going to worry about kickers and punters. We're just not going to worry about that. So that kind of – I know there's a couple of good punters out there, but why draft them, really?
That's the truth.
So that wraps up our pre-draft discussions per se. I unless there's something big that happens among Cardinals news, it's something worth talking about, we'll probably take the week off next week, and we will come back in 2 weeks, and we'll try to beat Mike Mayock to the punch, and we'll do our own mock drafts to go through kind of the first round, kind of play out how we see things going in round 1 and see how they compare to the actual thing. Maybe talk a little bit of Cardinals things, some other rumors. Maybe I'll do the NFL draft breakdown podcast thing and ask for some hot takes so we can discuss those.
Always.
we can talk hot takes. But thanks for listening to another episode of Revenge of the Birds Radio, another show. That's a wrap. That's Seth Cox. I'm Jess Ritten. We'll be back talking Cardinals another day. Go Cardinals.
Have a good night, everybody.
You've been listening to Revenge of the Birds. Keep the conversation going by visiting revengeofthebirds.com. Follow us on Twitter at Revenge of Birds. You can also find us on iTunes at facebook.com/Revenge of the Birds.